Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Kent City Council Committee of the Whole meeting. Today is May 12th, 2020, and again, this is a remote meeting due to the COVID-19 coronavirus emergency. So thank you to everyone that is listening in. Looking at our agenda, Kim, do we have everyone present today?
Council President Troutner, everybody is present and accounted for.
Great, thank you. Moving on, we don't have a big agenda today. Are there any changes from council or staff?
No changes from staff this afternoon.
Great, so if there are no objections, we will approve this agenda as it is and move on to presentations. And the first presentation that we have is on the Mill Creek at 76th Avenue flood protection improvements. And I'd like to welcome Cheryl.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can hear
Yes.
you. Welcome.
Great. I hope you're all staying well and healthy. I'm here to do yet another exciting property acquisition presentation for you today. We're here to ask that the council authorize the mayor to sign a settlement agreement to pay for the acquisition of a drainage easement, an access easement, and a temporary construction easement on portions of property owned by the Earl M. Jorgensen Company, located at 22011 76th Avenue South. As you're all aware, the city is moving forward with its Mill Creek at 76th Avenue flood protection project. The goal of this project is to improve Mill Creek's conveyance capacity to reduce flood risk through the 76th Avenue South industrial corridor. This project requires that the city acquire from the Jorgensen Company a drainage easement and a temporary construction easement that will be granted to the city, along with an access easement, which will be granted to the neighboring property owner, and that'll be coming from Jorgensen's property to the next door neighbor's property. Jorgensen has already signed a settlement agreement accepting the city's fair market value offer of $110,100 for a 6,096 square foot drainage easement to the city, $64,300 for a 33,830 square foot temporary construction easement, $27,000 for a 2,803 square foot access easement to be granted to the neighboring property owner, and $617,200 in compensation for damages to the property, for a combined total of $818,000, $818,600. The fair market value was determined by the city's appraiser, and it was confirmed by the city's review appraiser. This acquisition will be paid for by the project budget for the Mill Creek at 76th Avenue Flood Protection Improvements Project. And this project is funded through a $3 million state grant and the city storm drainage fund. Are there any questions?
Any questions or comments from anyone? Councilmember Core.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Cheryl, this is from the grant, right, that we received from the state, just clarification?
Yeah, it says it's from the grant and the city storm drainage fund. So I'm not sure how much of it will be paid, of this particular acquisition will be paid from the grant, but that is part of the project, how it's funded.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions or any comments from my colleagues? All right, Cheryl, is that the end of your presentation?
That is it.
All right, so anybody have any objections moving this agreement forward to the consent calendar? All right, so it looks like we will move that forward and move on in our agenda. Thank you so much, Cheryl.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Next, I would like to welcome Derek Matheson and Pat Fitzpatrick to talk about the Public Facilities District Board of Directors.
All right. Thank you, Madam President. So As the council is aware, Kent has a public facilities district. The PFD collects a small sales tax that it remits to the city to help pay debt service on the Acesso Showware Center. The city council appoints a 5-member board that oversees the district. Of those 5, the council appoints 2 on its own and 3 with recommendations from local business organizations and local labor councils. Lou Sellers has resigned position number 5, which is one of the 3 positions that requires recommendations. So the city clerk advertised the position, received 1 application, forwarded it to the Kent Chamber of Commerce, the Kent Downtown Partnership, and the King County Labor Council for recommendations. Only one of those local organizations provided recommendations, and that was a positive recommendation from the Kent Chamber of Commerce. So your council president has reviewed the application and recommends that the council appoint Zenovia Harris to the unexpired term on the PFD board that expires on August 31st, 2023. Zenovia is the Chief Executive Officer of the Kent Chamber of Commerce. She's a certified diversity professional and in the last decade has worked in higher education, sales and marketing, and owned her own business. She has a bachelor's degree in business management, a master's degree in public administration, and a real estate broker's license. So that's the council president's recommendation. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to City Attorney Pat Fitzpatrick, and he'll briefly talk about our work to review the mission of the board and align that to statute and ordinance.
Thank you, Derek. I just wanted to let the council know that I am currently conducting a review of the many foundational documents that created the PFD to ensure the board is operating in accordance with its mandated purpose and authority. There are a significant number of documents that created the board, and there's other things that control the authority of the board, including state law, a city ordinance, an interlocal agreement, board bylaws, and then a number of resolutions. So it's a kind of a pretty dense web of information that we're trying to work through here. And the purpose of the exercise, essentially, we've had a lot of board turnover since the board's inception back in 2007. And a number of city staff members who are key to the creation of the PFD are no longer with us. And in addition, there's been a lot of change on the council since that time. So we thought it would be helpful to go through this exercise just to ensure that the board is operating in accordance with all of those documents that I mentioned. So I anticipate that being done within the next few weeks here. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Great, I think that's a great idea. How often, will you remind me, how often does this board meet?
The board meets on a quarterly basis.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Derek or Pat? All right, I don't see any hands raised. Are there any objections to moving Zenovia forward on the PFD board? All right, we will move that to the consent calendar then. Thank you. All right, moving along on the agenda, next up is Michelle Wilmot. She's going to talk about the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Council President. Good evening, council members and Mayor. Michelle Wilmot here with the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee. And I just wanted to report to you on an emergency meeting that was held by the committee last Thursday. Since the beginning of the COVID crisis, we've been in close touch with our hoteliers, and unfortunately, they have been sharing with us some pretty significant reductions in the occupancy at the hotels. They are seeing overnight stays drop, and so they're seeing almost a 98% reduction in some cases. A couple of our hoteliers are not seeing as bad as that, but nevertheless, we're seeing a significant drop. And with that, we determined there was a very urgent need to revisit our lodging tax grant process. We had just put out a call for applications in March, and then this crisis hit. So we knew we needed to check in on our revenues and adjust accordingly. And what we did in our meeting was have a look at what our proposed revenues will look like coming forward for 2020. We had Shane Sorensen from our finance division give us a medium and a worst case scenario. And what we've decided to do is proceed very conservatively and anticipate a worst case scenario based on what our hoteliers are telling us about their overnight stay activity. One silver lining of this crisis, as far as this fund goes, is we've seen multiple cancellations of events. So of the ones that have not canceled, there's a lot on hold as far as grant contracts that we had entered into. What we're seeing right now is a reduction in activity of about $150,000 that we can put back into the fund. This includes a substantial grant that the Lodging Tax Committee awarded to the city to do business marketing and communications. And at the very beginning of this crisis, my colleague Bill Ellis and I agreed to cancel that contract right away. So what we've put back into the fund with that plus some canceled events is about a little bit more than $150,000 back into the fund. Unfortunately, looking at the projections, these revenue refunds were not quite enough to keep us in a place where we can maintain our minimum fund balance. So we were forced to go and look a little bit deeper. And of the obligations we have for the remainder of this year, we've made some other reductions as well. We cut in half our business and leisure marketing contract we had with J-Ray Ads and PR. I think I just was putting this forward to you all just last month, I think. And so we approved that, and now we've had to reduce it significantly. We're also looking at a reduction to the remaining contract funds we have with the Kent Chamber, as well as with the Seattle Thunderbirds. So we've found some savings to put back into the lodging tax fund and still keep our ongoing commitments with our contracts with our awardees. What we've also asked, and the Lodging Tax Committee agreed to do, was to support a transfer of $50,000 in lodging tax funds back to the city's general fund to help cover the costs of economic development staff activities. Since this crisis hits, we have been very busy working to help our business community mitigate the impacts of this crisis, and have been directing them towards loans and different grant programs. We have been really working hard to help support our small business hospitality industry, especially with the restaurants, and we're partnering with our neighboring communities to do that. There's some other programs we're doing to really help move us forward as we move into a recovery phase, which we all hope will be sooner rather than later. But anyway, with that, the committee has recommended that we transfer $50,000 of our LTAC funds back to the general fund to help cover the costs of economic development staff and our activities to really help support and help our businesses mitigate this crisis, and then even more important, navigate the recovery process. So we're looking for your approval on this transfer of revenue dollars.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Councilmember Larmer, do you have a comment or a question? Are you there, Councilmember Larmer?
She's on mute, I think.
Okay, well, her microphone is unmuted. We'll come back to you in just a second, Marley. Councilmember Core.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle, for this presentation, and thank you for thinking about our business, small businesses and the impact, and trying to see what we can do. But do we have any idea how this funding will be used to help our small businesses?
Absolutely. Like I mentioned, Bill Ellis and I, we have been very heavily engaged in business mitigation, crisis navigation efforts since this crisis began. We have looked to many of those activities, which includes regional efforts. We're doing a lot of promotional activities with our restaurants when it comes to, we're creating some videos, some tastemaker series on video for our restaurateurs. We're helping promote takeout and delivery restaurants that are still working. We've got a regional effort going on with the Seattle. We've got our restaurants listed in the Puget Sound regional restaurant map. Even our neighbors in Tukwila are using their lodging tax dollars. They have opened it up to the region to promote the sale of experiences and gift cards for business community to help infuse cash and bring those dollars in the door now that we can hopefully have our businesses use, help them support them now, but then these events can be used for later. We are absolutely amplifying these programs here in our local community. Even the city of SeaTac has a show Washington Love program that we've been trying to amplify here. We've absolutely partnered with the chamber and with the KDP and with our commercial property owners who have many, many tenants to make sure that folks are aware of these different programs. We're also directing people to grants to help folks mitigate and just work and survive through this crisis with financial supports. We are looking at new programs and new grants. Many of the things that come on board disappear. They're totally depleted in a matter of hours, if not days. So we're tracking that and doing a lot of outreach with folks directly to make sure they're aware of these different supportive programs the minute they come on board. And we're also in touch with media about what's happening and what the community is doing to help our business community manage through this process. So that's just a sort of a handful of and an overview of some of the activities. We've actually put this together and shared a list with our lodging tax committee members, and I'm happy to share with the council as well.
That would be great, please. Thank you, Michelle.
Absolutely.
So Michelle, I'm going to go back to Councilmember Larmer's question. She's having
Okay.
some audio trouble. She wants to know whether we can expect further canceled events.
We may. We have our eyes on a couple of events that are still planned. We have a pretty significant event with the Women in Manufacturing. They're planning to hold their event in October, and they were well underway with their planning and with their hotel reservations and restaurant reservations and tours of various manufacturing companies here. They were well on their way, and my last conversation with them was that they absolutely wanted to continue moving forward. And obviously with the unknowns with the governor's orders and the shifting nature of this crisis, we're having to keep our eye on that. Same with a second event with the Kent Downtown Partnership. They've got a Cajun festival that they'd like to do, and in our conversations with their executive director, they absolutely want to do this event this summer. I know it was planned for June. It may be pushed off until later in the summer. And then we've got a golf tournament that was planned for April, and they are looking to hold this later in the summer as well. Obviously, if we're keeping close tabs on these, and we'll work with these folks to get our refunds back, or get refunds back for the first portion of the dollars that we've granted them. As our system is in place where we give our grantees half of their payment up front, and then we give them the second half of their payment more as a reimbursement at the end when we receive a results report, which is required by the state. One of the events that did cancel already was an event we had with NASA, which was planned to be held in June, and they had to cancel that, and we've already invoiced them for the first half of the money that we'd given them. So we're expecting that back.
Thank you, Councilmember Boyce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say first a comment. I just want to say I am the chair of this committee representing the council, and Bill Ellis and Michelle just does a phenomenal job, very thorough. And also I thought it was important that the money and the time that they put in to help manage this committee, you know, they need to be compensated. So that 50,000 is going to help compensate that. And number two, I think Michelle, I think we also, I don't know what you said, but we cancel all of the 2020 bigs that we get, right? We get them twice a year. So right now, the grants that get off in April and September, they have been put on hold for right now.
Thank you, Councilmember Boyce. I had neglected to say that, but yes, we all opted to put any grants for 2020 on hold for the remainder of the year.
And also this committee, I mean, these are very business people. They get it, they understand it. So when Michelle called a meeting last week, we went down and Michelle and Bill and I kind of talked about the thing where we need to shift it, present it to the committee. No pushback. Of course, they want to get it all back, but there's certain things that's still going to continue to happen. We made commitments to, but really a solid committee, and things went real smooth. So once again, kudos to Bill and Michelle. They do a tremendous amount of work behind the scenes. So thanks again.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Yeah, echo on your comments, Councilmember Boyce. You know, you came to us, Michelle, like you said, a month ago, and gave your presentation, and now with everything that has changed, and my guess is things will continue to evolve and change, but you guys really are staying on top of it, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate you keeping the council up to date on all of these changes.
Our pleasure.
Any other comments or questions from my colleagues? All right, so seeing no hands raised, are there any objections to moving this forward and reallocating the 50,000 from the previously awarded to back into the general fund? If nobody has any issues with that, we will move that to the consent calendar. All right. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you all.
All right, and moving on in the agenda, I'm going to welcome Michelle Ferguson to talk about budget adjustment ordinance.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Make it a little closer so that she's in the tunnel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Ferguson, the interim financial planning manager, and I'm here to talk about the consolidating budget adjustment ordinance for budget adjustments made between January 1st, 2020 and March 31st, 2020. So there are adjustments totaling $2,236,278 that have been previously approved by council. So there are $298,000 in grants that were previously approved. $78,700 in the criminal justice fund, which includes grants for JAG, grant for equipment, a boat grant, a sex offender grant, and a traffic equipment grant. In the drainage fund, there was $253,300, $169,300 for King County for the Lake Fenwick aerator improvements, which was then offset by a King County grant for the Downey Farmstead restoration, 50,000 NPDS grant from the Department of Ecology for water quality storm water capacity. There's also $1,288,270,000 in carry forward budgets for parks, facilities, and shore life cycle that were previously approved in 19 that are now being carried forward to the 2020 budgets. For the facilities fund, there is $550,000 that's being carried forward for projects that include roof repairs, HVAC replacements, building life cycle, floors, backup power, Meridian pool, and kitchen equipment. The Capital Resources Fund is carrying forward $391,770 for parks major maintenance projects, including parking lots, trails, lighting, signage, fencing, and structures. The general fund is carrying forward $221,500 for parks program projects, including $25,000 for the recreation plan analysis and update, $25,000 for a GIS intern, $73,000 for the HSA programs, $46,000 for public defense appeals, and $17,000 for marketing plans. $125,000 is being carried forward for showware concession stand rebranding. There's also $650,000 in other approved items, including funds for approved that have already been approved for the senior service levy, and then use of fund balance for the ECD term limited position that was approved back in January. The use of the King County ILA for mitigation funds for the ILA property, and the use of reimbursed funds for Camp Police Department training grass. So the major ones, the council has not seen these budget changes, which total $7,524,947. The largest part is going to be for the transfer of 2019 B&O square footage from the general fund into streets. So these monies were approved by receipted in the general fund in 2019, but we weren't able to transfer them until after the year closed. And so basically it fell into fund balance, and now we're taking those out and moving them to streets where they should have gone all along. So it's $1.7 million coming out of streets, and then $1.7 million going into streets. So it doubles it to the 3.4 million. So there's also, council has also approved all of the Meet Me on Meeker projects, but they were all accumulated in one spot, and now we're taking those monies and moving them out to the various projects where they're going to be spent, which totals $3.15 million. So 1.58 million in projects that were in one spot and now being moved to all of these different little projects that they have set up. There was also union contract increases for Teamsters and ASME that totaled $782,000 in 14 different funds. So the Teamsters had 2 range increases for most of its employees. ASME had 8 classification range increases, as well as a longevity increase for employees who had 20 or more years of service, which also then increased the amount for non-representatives that also had 20 years of service or more. There's an increase for $120,000 in the general fund due to a transfer from ECD into Parks Downtown Placemaking Project for a lunar rover fabrication and the establishment of the budget within the project. $174,580 increase, which is mostly to move prior year interest income from IT into a project, their tech plans projects. There's also a $60,000 increase to administration communication budget for marketing, survey, and professional services. This expense is under review right now as part of the COVID-19 expense reduction, so that one may or may not stay in the budget depending on what happens. There was a $122,000 decrease in expenses due to the true-up of CDBG program budgets to actual funds received and the reduction of a WashDOT grant expired funds in the street fund. And the last one is $53,000 decrease due to the elimination of the transfer from criminal justice into the general fund for overtime review of the red light cameras. We've changed the way it's been budgeted, so now the overtime will go directly into the red light camera fund instead of taking those monies out into the general fund. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Michelle. A question from Councilmember Larmer. If you go back up and look, you have that 550,000 for facility projects, which include 25,000 to the KM pool. Her question is, what is that for? Because there was an understanding that we were done with the pool.
Paula, do you have any details around this one?
No, I don't have the details on that in front of me, but we'll be happy to send something out to you after this meeting.
Thank you. Any other questions from council members? All right, everybody's quiet today. So are there any objections to moving this forward to the consent calendar? Councilmember Boyce, you have your mic on. Did you have a question?
No, I just want to say that I spent some time with Derek today going over this here, and I think the team did a really good job of capturing everything. So that's the reason for no question from me. So thank you. All right, great. Councilmember Core, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. Thank you. Michelle, the first point of transfer of $3,411,220,000 to from BNO square footage from general fund to streets, and it's establishment of a budget in streets for the use of these funds. So 1.7 and 1.7, did I miss a point in there? What is?
So we have to establish an expense transfer out in the general fund, and then we establish the revenues in the street fund, and then an offsetting expense.
Okay, I got you. Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments from colleagues? All right, looking at our agenda, it looks like it brings us to the end of our agenda. I know that this was a very quick meeting. Sometimes we've had meetings that have gone a little bit longer recently, but I think that the information that was shared today is very important, especially with all of these things that are unknown. It's important that we continue to communicate as council members and then also share that with our public. So,
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilmember Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I ask Pat a question unrelated to anything we've talked about today? Excuse me. Pat, are we still contractually obligated to cover the minimum number of seats there whenever the Thunderbirds are in play over shore during this time?
I don't understand contractually with the Thunderbirds. Or
well,
I
with showware,
guess I don't
aren't we
understand.
obligated a certain number of seats?
We're not obligated to any seats. I think the budget assumes certain attendance at events, but I guess I don't totally understand the question.
Maybe I'll talk to you at a different time then.
Yeah, maybe we can talk offline, and I'd be more than happy to look into your question.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you. All right, if there is nothing else, that brings us to the end of our agenda, and we are adjourned. Stay safe and have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
a lot of people are very, very interested in. So Department of Health is working with private sector partners to try and find a solution. Public Health also wants to give negative test results, as it is a very important part of our surveillance. Next question, very similar. Can we get the number of people who have recovered from the virus versus the number of people who have died? So as you can imagine, that is also one of those overwhelming numbers. In a phone call that I just had with King County, they are trying to get out as much information as possible, again, without overwhelming their systems. But there is a dashboard that you can go to, and it's a long